sharing some wonderful ideas on this important issue. Today's webinar will be moderated by the chairperson of the Sustainability and Livelihood Research Organization in the person of Monica Douglas. We're very, very glad to have her and the rest of the panelists. I will now hand over this to Ms. Douglas. Ms. Douglas, please. Thank you.
Thank you, CJ, and welcome everyone. So we have a great panelist lineup of experts, and here is today's format. First, we'll hear from each of the panelists, and we'll be highlighting the industry perspective, the use of technology and partnerships, and a case study. Then we'll touch briefly on these areas: drivers, implementation, and public awareness. Finally, I'll hand it over to CJ for questions from the audience. So what I'd like to do is now hand it over to Jonathan, and I would also refer the audience to everyone's bio on the Suliver website. So Jonathan, go ahead and dive into your perspective on this issue.
Great, thanks so much, Monica, for the introduction. I'm actually back and forth. I thought I could share my files. I'm having a little bit of trouble. Let's see if I can do this. Thank you for your patience with me. Everyone, do you see my screen?
We do.
Okay, great. So I will try to keep this brief. My name is John Deutsch. I'm a professor of culinary arts and food science at Drexel University in Philadelphia. We're talking about collaborative approaches today to food waste prevention and reduction. And our approach has been a very culinary focused one. And I just wanted to tell that story of how we got into that world. Oh, I see my slides. I'm gonna go back to play those again. Hopefully that'll work. Okay. So this is not at all. Okay, I am able to control my slides, so hopefully that will be able to continue. All right, so if you're listening, I can now control my slides, so I think it's easier, there we go, to just leave it like that. So at Drexel, we're a doctoral granting research university with a culinary program, which is a little bit unusual. And we started something a few years ago called the Drexel Food Lab. And the Drexel Food Lab is a good food product development lab. And we use a very broad umbrella for good food, and that means some aspect of sustainability, health promotion, or food access. And I'm gonna go through quite quickly. We are platform agnostic, and we do projects for everyone from startups to multinationals to nonprofits to government agencies. And I just want to tell the story of how we came to this work and how important I think it is to have a culinary and food science perspective in the work of food waste reduction. It's something that we, in my opinion, too often defer to public policy, environmental people, and we forget the food part of food waste. We're measuring often in pounds and truckloads, and we could be measuring in nutrients. So that's been really our focus. We started this work in Philadelphia based on a request from Tom O'Donnell, who many of you in the food waste world know from the Environmental Protection Association in the US. And his idea was there's a lot of food waste in Philadelphia, and it's going basically directly into compost or trash. And Philadelphia is a very interesting city because there's tremendous wealth and there's tremendous poverty side by side. And so he asked us to look at how to keep food at the top of that food recovery hierarchy in feeding people and not having it go to landfill. And so we started with an audit of where food waste was going. And we looked, our numbers were pretty consistent with what's happening globally, and wanted to look specifically at the level of retailer through consumer. And what we found was that locally in Philadelphia, just in our little neighborhood, there were about 300,000 pounds of surplus food, 290,000 pounds, which is about 5 tractor trailer truckloads of surplus food that was going to compost or landfill. And at the same time, we found that about 1 in 4 people locally did not have enough food to eat. The national average in the US is about 1 in 7. So we have extreme poverty right near this abundance. And we also calculated that the food needs of this local neighborhood required about 73,000 pounds a month. So about 1/4 of the amount of surplus food. So the public policy and planning people devised a scheme to keep that food at the top of the food recovery hierarchy through a pickup and donation program. And that's all well and good. But what we quickly found was that we were not actually solving the problem. We were moving the food waste around the city. So for example, a nonprofit soup kitchen or shelter could go to a supermarket and pick up surplus brown bananas that are pulled from the shelves because they're overripe and bring them to that soup kitchen or shelter. That's wonderful. It's a wonderful opportunity. But once they get there, they were just being thrown away at the user level. So our students, in collaboration with our faculty, devised some culinary solutions for this. Very simple. This is low-tech culinary innovation. But very, very simple solutions that really changed what we were seeing. So one example is converting bananas into a frozen banana ice cream. You could do this with 1 ingredient, just bananas. You could also add water, milk, a sweetener, and so on. But it's delicious, just a frozen pureed banana. And we were able to convert that surplus food from being about 10% of it being eaten as a fresh fruit or vegetable, in this case bananas, to 100% consumption of anything prepared into this value-added format without adding any cost, any nutrients beyond the labor of freezing and pureeing. We're able to get fresh fruits and vegetables to people who need them. So this is one example, and this is kind of a cute example, but this got us on a whole trajectory of developing lots more upcycled foods. And what we found is that there are tens of thousands of pounds of perfectly good food, produce in particular, that have potential for upcycling. I'm going to skip a few things to be sensitive to time. And then over time, we've moved more and more up the food stream to the food manufacturing side. So another great example of potential of upcycling what would normally be food waste is some work we did with a product called Sparks, which if you, it's made by a company called Baldor, which does fresh cut produce. So when you go to the supermarket and you see little carrot sticks and watermelon cubes and things like that, it comes from this factory. They trademarked the term Sparks, which is simply scraps spelled backwards. And with those scraps, they have developed a dried vegetable blend. And with that blend, we've done things like soup mixes, We're doing a fresh pasteurized soup base and a variety of other applications, so breading applications and so on. And we've even taken this as far as being able to develop a muffin for school food service that has a full serving of vegetables within it. One of the challenges in this world of upcycled food is we want to make sure that the story that we're talking about is not taking the leftovers of the rich, the trash, the potential trash of the rich, and feeding it to poor people or people who don't have enough to eat. So we want the story to be that this food that we're wasting is lovingly produced, and we want to make sure that it's available for everyone on this planet of limited resources. So we've also been working to do some upmarket surplus food. So this is a pickled vegetable relish called chow chow, made from surplus food that can sell for a premium at high-end stores, but could also be sold at a discount for people who need it. So we've been doing a lot more work on those kinds of products as well, and that has resulted in some really interesting brands. This is one owned by Phil Abundance, which is our food bank, called Abundantly Good. And a whole new category has emerged of products that are really advertising the fact that they come from surplus food. And so having this to be a high-end product, I think, is really appealing and has great potential. I just want to end. I'm going to skip a few more because my time is up. Just want to end with sort of where we're going from here. We've been focused on this new category of value-added surplus products, upcycled foods, which has been our focus. So it's now we've established pretty easily that we can produce such upcycled foods and get over the technical hurdles, but the big challenge is consumer acceptance. And what we found is that by calling these products upcycled and by doing a little bit of consumer education, we see great opportunity for this category of products. And so in terms of where we're going from here, we have a grant from the Cluniel Foundation, who's very generously supporting us to support entrepreneurs in the upcycling world to overcome the hurdles associated with those products. So it's very challenging, as many of you know, to launch a new food product, even in the best and easiest conditions. And then if you try to use food scraps, or food that would otherwise be waste to do that, you have a whole additional set of regulatory, food safety, and feasibility hurdles. And so our job is to help manufacturers through those hurdles. So I'm going to stop there, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. I really appreciate your presentation. And so next, we are going to hand it over to Dr. Stephen Finn. Thank you, Stephen. In light of our technical difficulties, I am wondering if CJ is on the line.
Yes, I'm online. Yes.
Okay, CJ. So is there a possibility that we could get a question for Jonathan from the audience?
Yes. Let me go to the this. Yes, there's a question we got yesterday, which asking how is the government involved in food and the food projects that you're?
Great question. So the question is, how is the government involved? I can speak to the U.S. government. Our work has been international, but I'm not very familiar with the regulations in each country we deal with. One of the very important things is that there's been a lot of misunderstanding about laws related to food donation and food disposal. And the biggest one of those is a lack of awareness in the US of something called the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act from 1996. So the Bill Emerson Act specifies that if you donate food in good faith to a nonprofit for the purpose of feeding others, you are not subject to any liability. And still, even though that act is now over 20 years old, when we approach retailers, restaurants, hotels, even wholesalers, and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about donating your surplus food, they answer with one very American, very short-sighted word, which is liability. They say, oh, no, we can't do that, liability. Well, that's absolutely not true in the US. The only time you could be held accountable is if you're selling that surplus food, or if you are negligent and deliberately trying to harm someone. So the government has been unusually progressive in the US on this case, and actually I've been doing some work internationally in Israel and have spoken about this quite extensively, and was glad to see that Israel in October of 2018 passed a very similar Good Samaritan Act, so that donations there can be free from liability. So in that way, government efforts have been extremely helpful. There's also been some support, although not enough in my opinion, from the US Department of Agriculture in supporting research in this area. And the previous EPA administration under Gina McCarthy was very progressive in raising visibility for this as well, although they don't support research in the same way as the US Department of Agriculture. And then there's also some opportunities at the local level, the municipal level. So the city of Philadelphia, in my case, and the water department and the Department of Environmental Conservation and Waste Management, all are very enthusiastic about this, because the less food waste we have, the less environmental impact, and the less cost for carting and so on.
I'm ready to go, John.
Thank you, Jonathan. Stephen, are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Brilliant. So, Dr.
Okay.
Finn, let's hand it over to you for your presentation.
Okay, great. Well, happy to be here. Thank you. And thank you, Jonathan, for setting us off. Happy to be here talking about using measurement and data to prevent food waste. And to start, I just want to do a few things here today. I want to quickly set the stage on the scale and impact of global food waste for everyone. I want to give some brief background on LeanPath and what we do to address food waste. I want to quickly talk about the existing measurement gap regarding food waste. And last, I want to bring those three themes together and demonstrate how to make the business case for food waste prevention and how a measurement focus enables prevention and allows us to cut food waste in half. So let's just quickly start with the scale. I think everybody is pretty familiar with this. We know that global food waste is an enormous problem. We're wasting between 1/3 and 1/2 of the global food supply annually at a cost of roughly $1 trillion. And in the US, we waste about 40% of our food. And we all know about the serious environmental and social costs of this waste, the impacts on climate and water pollution, the loss of biodiversity, the missed opportunities to feed people, to name a few. So we have a lot of work to do regarding food waste, and going forward, prevention and measurement are the keys to solving the food waste challenge. That's what we believe at LeanPath. And we need to implement measurement at scale. So fortunately, we're in a period of strong momentum The main global goal, of course, is target 12.3. It's driving all of us and why we're here today. And it's spurring many other goals as well that are driving action to reduce food waste by 50%. And that's great. That's what we're all about at LeanPath, enabling that reduction. So a bit on the company. At LeanPath, we're pioneers in food waste prevention. We invented this technology back in 2004. We've been on a mission ever since. We have 4 offices around the globe. We have deployments in more than 30 countries and in all 50 US states. So we have global commitment and global reach to address the food waste challenge. Some customers of ours, client partners, you're likely familiar with many of them, organizations like Sodexo, Aramark, IKEA, Google, Stanford, and many others across the system. So we're in a lot of places. Our focus at LeanPath is on prevention, resource reduction, at top level of the food waste reduction hierarchy. It's the most impactful point of the hierarchy, both financially and environmentally, and yet it's often overlooked, right, due to cultural norms and really the easy disposal of our food. So we focus on reducing the source of food waste in the first place and shifting emphasis to the top of the hierarchy. And I always like to start with why. Why do we do this? Really for the love of food, because food is precious. And really what connects us more than our food, right? It's what we gather over, it's what we celebrate. And yet we waste it away, 30 to 40% in the US, up to half globally, as we said, 1 to 2 billion tons per year, despite the high levels of hunger and the huge environmental costs that are associated with that. Lots of water consumption, greenhouse gas emissions, energy consumption, landfill use, etc. So food waste really doesn't make any sense. And we work on the front lines in kitchens to prevent it from occurring and to change behavior. At LeanPath, we say that reducing food waste really matters. If you look at the SDGs, it's clear why food and food waste lies at the heart of all of these, right? We won't resolve hunger or climate if we don't resolve food waste. And if we can reduce food waste, we do reduce it, we get a huge multiplier effect that obviously benefits all of the other SDGs. If you think about reducing food waste, you also reduce all of the plastic packaging that's associated with that often goes to the oceans. So 15 years ago, we set out to solve a really big problem, and what we call the elephant in the kitchen in operations. Food waste has long been with us, but due to cultural norms, it hasn't been fully addressed. It's been tolerated and tacitly accepted, in part because we've gotten really efficient at disposing of it. So at LeanPath, we've been at this for a long time, and yet we're continuously innovating and integrating hardware and software to drive operational and behavior change to reduce food waste. So our products range from bench scales to mobile units to floor scales to an advanced analytics program and consumer-focused messaging platforms as well to address it. So our vision is to ensure a sustainable future by eliminating global food waste. And our mission is to make food waste prevention everyday practice in the world's kitchens. And I think importantly, we're one of the leading advocates for global food waste prevention. We speak around the globe on this topic often, and we donate a lot of time and expertise to it. So we believe organizations can and really must take control of the issue. And so we provide not just tools, but really a complete food waste prevention strategy to do that. In terms of impact, since 2014 alone, we've helped prevent more than 35 million pounds of food waste at client sites. That translates to millions of dollars in savings. It removes annual emissions from 24 million cars, 12 million gallons of gasoline saved, billions of gallons of water saved, and of course, all the associated packaging as well. So coming back to the national and the global food landscape, we know we have a measurement gap. The key issue is that organizations want to measure, but many don't have measurement programs in place to get data. And we need that data, right, to define baselines and measure change over time, to conduct root cause inquiries and develop solutions for them, and really to engage people in the food waste prevention efforts. So basically, we need data to really unpack the problem. So with data, we can get to the root of those problems, we can get supporters, we can develop solutions, and we can really focus on not only reducing food waste, but preventing it going forward. So to get on the path to 2030, we need to close that measurement gap, and we have 3 really important points to consider. The first one is that the path to reduction requires prevention, and so we need to shift the conversation to prevention. Second, measurement is really the optimal route to prevention because metrics influence behavior. And third, automation is the optimal approach to measurement. Automation is 3 times more effective than manual tracking efforts, so it's much more robust, it saves more time and money. So with that context, let's turn to making the business case for food waste prevention, because creating change in the business sector is really critical for impact toward target 12.3. And so we really want to help business leaders make the case for prevention. So the first thing is really to focus on the dollar impact, right? Food waste results in billions of dollars in lost economic value. So there's great need for it in a business setting. Really, we have note that 4 to 10% of purchased food is thrown away before it's even being plated. Also, beyond food costs, there are 4 other areas to consider: energy and water use, labor, lost sales and profit, and disposal costs. So, really, food waste costs an organization in 5 ways, and that's very significant. And also, food waste measurement and reduction has really emerged as a standard and an expectation, right? And that's good. Food sector organizations really need to react to those to meet consumer expectations. So we've seen rising momentum behind food waste reduction over the past 4 to 5 years, and we've seen responsible goal setting, Target 12.3, the Paris Agreement, the EU Framework Directive, lots of really good stuff going on, which is great. So the confluence of all of that change, the regulatory, the environmental, the social environment, and the high cost of waste, it really warrants 2 things: making that business case for food waste prevention and making food waste prevention a key part of organizational strategy. And so how can you do that? Well, to build the business case, you can draw on and point to many drivers, right? All of those public commitments from organizations, perhaps your competition, like Sodexo and like Aramark, like Tesco, great work of organizations like Kroger, all these organizations setting goals to cut food waste by 50%. You've got a number of government initiatives. Australia just announced a new food waste, national food waste strategy. You've got standards from organizations like WRI and WRAP. Investor pressure for transparency. You have a number of analyst studies. You have a number of partnership initiatives. So all kinds of ammunition, if you will, out there in the public space to draw on to build your business case. And so once you do that, how do you deliver on that promise of prevention? Really, that's the key question. And it starts with 2 things. First, you want to recognize that food waste is a behavioral problem, and successful prevention requires everyone to repeat the right behaviors at scale. And second, you want to focus on measurement, right? Because measurement really matters most. Metrics influence behavior. Data provides visibility that leads to behavior and operational change, and ultimately to improvement. So measurement works 2 ways. You need to find out what is being wasted and why, so that you can understand and improve your waste stream, setting goals to begin tracking improvement, and also so you can change team behavior and engage your employees and raise awareness, and really importantly, to celebrate success as well. So as Drucker said, you can't measure what you can't manage what you don't measure, and that's a key in this space. So there are a lot of opportunity areas for impact in kitchens: overproduction, spoilage, trim waste, disposal patterns. But everything starts with tracking, and smart meters make food waste tracking easy, and that's what we focus on. So with fixed, mobile, and floor scale products, we enable organizations to measure food waste anywhere in their operation. And in some of our units, we provide pictures that provide visual links to the data. We have floor scales that handle volume quickly. In terms of the process of tracking, operators will enter food type and loss reason, source and disposition, just a few key things. And the dollar impact of each transaction is immediately displayed for the employee. And there's really instant impact in seeing all of the value of those daily waste transactions. We extend the cost over the course of the year. We show environmental impact. So very impactful for the person entering the transaction. With LeanPath, that data is instantly transferred to the cloud, so it's always available. It can be analyzed in myriad ways at the enterprise level to allow for prevention. Once the data is captured, chefs can analytics provides clear, intuitive graphics, great drill down capability, so chefs can really slice and dice to get meaningful data on where food is being wasted in their operation and react to it. So that data and the process really, it yields insights to drive behavior change, right? We even include gamification in here to build in rewards to increase engagement and really to make food waste tracking fun. The data motivates action. We have alert features that enable real-time intervention from a chef to a frontline service worker, for example. And data, it inspires measurable improvement too. We have a goals module that can be used as well to further focus on specific items. So to sum up, what are the key benefits of measurement? Well, really, reducing waste by up to 50%, generating that cost savings of between 2 and 8% of food purchases. And of course, the additional benefits, saving on labor costs, saving on disposal costs, protecting the environment, increasing employee engagement, all great things that go along with them. And it all starts with tracking and measuring food waste. So, this is an opportunity to, why track your food waste? It's an opportunity to connect to a higher level purpose driven by the SDGs and really to help sustain your business and the environment. And it's an opportunity to ensure strong triple bottom line benefits while appealing to external stakeholders and inspiring and energizing your workforce too. And really, it's just simply the right thing to do. So we're working with multiple organizations to make food waste prevention everyday practice in the world's kitchens. Always happy to talk about this and love to get involved in solutions with you. So please join us in this journey to make food waste prevention and measurement daily practice in the world's kitchens.
Thank you, Steve. I really appreciated that presentation. Gave us a lot to think about. And so I'm going to ask if our colleague from Europe is on the line. Tove, are you on? I don't yet hear from Tove. So I have a question for both of you, and I'm going to ask Jonathan first. What is the role of education in all of this? We have formal and informal. Does it start in restaurants perhaps, or should it start in elementary school? Let me ask that to Jonathan.
Great. I think yes is the answer. One thing we found is that people are very receptive to changing behavior around food waste, which is no easy feat. I mean, if you think about our own eating habits and maybe weight control or trying to eat greener or something like that, it's very hard to change eating habits. But people are surprisingly receptive to eating food made from scraps, upcycled foods. However, they require education to get there. And that education, I think, has to happen at all levels. So we've done a lot of work around consumer education and consumer messaging, what terms you use, what messaging you use. We worked with the James Beard Foundation last year to develop a very comprehensive curriculum for culinary students because we learned from our mentors and food industry people and chefs and food professionals. When I was coming up in the food industry, the mantra for any questionable item was "when in doubt, throw it out." That's very conservative and responsible from a food safety perspective. It's very wasteful from a sustainability perspective. So sort of balancing that, obviously we don't want to make anyone sick, but is throwing something out always the best answer? So really getting students to think differently about their purchasing, their sourcing, and their product utilization as they enter the professional world. And then the citizenry as a whole, educating politicians, educating policymakers. I think at every level, we definitely need more focus on that.
Yeah, I could not agree more with Jonathan. I think, I think when you talk about education, really important, as Jonathan said, change is hard for people, and there's really just work to be done at all levels of the educational system, K-12 and college as well, to really get at large-scale mindset change. Right, a lot of this is really about our culture, right, and about our value system around food. Right, and it's, when you think about it, it's just amazing how fast the transition from a very high focus on valuing food during the war years when people were to do so, to where we are now, where food surrounds us, it's ubiquitous, and it's become very relatively inexpensive, and so it's easy for people to over purchase and to discard. So we have a lot of work to do to change behavior and change that mindset, change our valuation of food, and I think that all starts with education, as Jonathan said, at all levels.
Thank you both. CJ, let's go to another question from the audience, please.
Thank you. There's a question here that says, what are the differences between food waste prevention strategies or food waste prevention measures in developing countries and those in advanced countries like the United States?
Yeah, interesting question. And Monica, it looks like Tove's slides are queued up here, so if she's ready to go, we can always go over there. One of the key differences between developing countries and developed countries is where food waste occurs, right? And so in the less developed world, typically we talk about food loss more, with food getting lost between farm and market due to insufficient cold storage and inadequate transportation systems to get that food to market where it can be consumed without a lot of spoilage along the way. And then in developed countries, we're very good at transporting food. We have effective storage systems. We have a good cold chain. And so we're really good at getting food to market. And most of our waste occurs on the consumer side due to that aforementioned culture of abundance that I talked about. And so really, we need prevention strategies at both, right? I just kind of outlined in that presentation in various sectors of food service in college and universities and in hospital, healthcare situations, and for those various enterprise customers. We need prevention strategies in these kitchens that are all over the world to focus on analyzing data, to measure it, to analyze that data, and to prevent the recurrence of food waste. And I think importantly, increasingly we will be more in the less developed countries as well. Obviously, they're expanding very quickly. The bulk of the population growth in the next 30 years is coming from the global south. And so I think it's important to, we don't want to shift these values of the developed world that result in so much food waste to those countries as they develop, right? We need to prevent, not only prevent food waste from occurring, but prevent that shift of values from occurring too. So I think increasingly we will see, as the less developed world becomes more developed, I think there's great opportunity right now to intervene, if you will, and get this message of food waste prevention and food evaluation instilled early to prevent them from going on the same path that developed countries have.
Great, thank you so much. Tove, are you on the line?
I am, if you can hear me.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us from Europe. Yes, I can. So let's go ahead and dig right into your presentation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my name is Tove Björklund, and I'm one of the founders behind a startup called ReCollab that's based in Sweden. And our newly launched project is called ReFood, where we're saving food from being wasted by turning it into vitamin-packed products. But before telling you more about ReFood, I want to give you some background information and the story behind ReFood. So we are 3 founders that met at Stockholm Resilience Center, which is a cutting-edge research center that focuses on sustainability and resilience. And we all love science, but we also got really frustrated that so much knowledge gets stuck in the scientific community. So instead of doing research, we just decided to start a company and to work a little bit more hands-on with sustainability challenges. And ReFood was born out of 3 different sustainability challenges that I would just give you some brief facts on now. And as the other presenters have already presented to you, the food system is the single largest driver of climate change and environmental degradation. So in other words, it's not sustainable, and it's definitely not efficient, as almost a third of the food is wasted. And in Sweden, that's 1.3 million tons each year. So with ReFood, we're also working to find innovative solutions to another problem, which is the lack of integration. So women born outside of Europe with low educational level have the lowest employment rate in Sweden. So only 37% have a job. And in the picture here, you can see two of our new colleagues that work with us with ReFood. And this is Asmira and Levan that work with the ReFood team now. The third challenge is connected to the Swedish health trend. The graph shows you the percentage of the population over 15 years old that are obese or overweight in each country. And as you can see, Sweden is reached 50%. It's the red dot here. So our mission is simple, vital, and non-negotiable. It's 0% food waste, 100% integration, and 100% healthiness. And ReFood has been financed since last summer by Vinnova, which is the Swedish governmental agency for innovation systems. And this picture shows you how we use the support from Vinnova to create a circular business model in collaboration with multiple other actors. And this is how it all works. So we collect food waste from our partners, which is mainly big grocery stores in the Stockholm area. We bring it to our kitchen, and then we turn the waste into healthy vitamin-packed products. We then transport our products to our retailers, which then completes the loop. And the small amount of waste that we can't use becomes feed for animals at a local farm nearby our kitchen. And this is the result of all hard work and the engine of the business. So this is Ugly Smoothie, which is ReFood's first product line, and it's made out of what we call ugly fruits and veggies because they've been rejected at supermarkets. In other words, it's made out of food that otherwise would have been wasted. And this product has enabled us to create a lot of added values. We've saved over 7,000 kilos of food since December, so we haven't been operating for a very long time. We've also had the opportunity to employ 3 amazing women, and for 2 of them, it's their first full-time job in Sweden. We've sold over 3,800 ugly smoothies during this period of time. But ReFood could not exist without our partners, as we're co-creating solutions for the different challenges. And in this picture here, you can see some examples of the companies that we work with. For example, we have ICA Maxi, which is the biggest company in Sweden with almost 50% of the total market within the grocery market. And it's one of our most important food waste partners, as almost 90% of the food that we get are collected from these stores. So what is it like to work with? Well, first of all, you need to understand how food waste fluctuate over time, and we've been able to match our recipes with what we call food waste seasons. So we use data that we collect from our partners. And working with food waste is not that simple, as you need to organize logistics and transportation of food waste. It's very time consuming, and this is why we need to find innovative solutions for how to organize a new system, or maybe even a new market for food waste. And we'll also spend a lot of time to find and develop partnerships with other companies that work with food and that get food waste that they can't use themselves. So this is why France is a great example of how policy can support companies like us that wants to create societal values through their business. And a policy that would be really appreciated is the one we see in France, where the French Parliament was the first in the world to put a ban on food stores to throw away food. We obviously need tougher regulations if we are to reach the Paris Agreement and the scientific goal of cutting food waste by at least 50% before 2030. But it's also a matter of ethics. Is it fair to throw away food in some parts of the world when there's a lack of food in other parts of the world? So we think that food can simply not end up in the trash. And as we say, there is no time to waste. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tove. Okay, so in light of time, I'm going to ask CJ to give us 2 more questions from the audience. And CJ, go ahead and direct your question to a particular panelist, and the other 2 can weigh in. Okay, well, we have lost CJ for the moment. So, Tove, I have a question regarding the model in France. and how much work was done with all of the industry partners to actually come up with that legal framework?
It took a couple of months, actually, but it was pretty quickly, I would say. They were really curious about our idea, and they really believed in us, and they've been very supportive during this entire process. But of course, building up a new organization and finding the practical solutions for this framework took, a couple of months.
Okay. So, Steve, regarding a country like France, what do you think of their model? Are you aware of it, and do they use technology?
Yeah, the France is really interesting and is doing great work in this space, and they have they've been awarded, I think, the last 2 years in a row from Barilla Foundation for their work. And a lot of this they got a lot of attention. This goes back to the Intermarché campaign of ugly fruits and vegetables, right? And there's just been more work along the way at the government level. But this concept of the ban of retailers sending food to landfill versus putting it to good use is really it's a really great story. It's a little bit misunderstood because it wasn't actually a ban in the sense that we think about it that way, but it really was. It really mandated that retailers collaborate and form a partnership with food banks in the system, right? So as we're talking about today, we're using the word collaboration, right? This sort of created the framework of the structure to promote collaboration in their system and form partnerships. So retailers with excess food form partnerships with food relief agencies, and really helped to drive home the importance of being circular, right? Of creating finding a home for this excess food and putting it to good use, as Tove said there, and is doing great work on putting it to its optimal use, right? Feeding people versus versus sending it to landfill. So there's really a lot, I think, inherent in the French culture. They really value food to start, and I think so. This collaborative, developing this collaborative structure to connect retailers with excess food and food banks was really kind of a natural extension of that, and it's really exciting. It's an exciting policy.
Great. Jonathan, I wanted to go back to your discussion on the developing world and ask you, and you sort of touched on the fact that we don't want to tell them what to do, but what do you think is the main obstacle that they might face to implement a program where they're dealing sustainably with food waste?
Sure. What we see in different parts of the world have waste at different levels. So in the U.S., Canada, Europe, Japan, that part of the world, most of the waste happens at the consumer level, post-retailer. So the system in terms of agriculture, logistics, cold chain is pretty efficient. There's tends to be an abundance of wealth among many citizens, so they overbuy. There's plate waste, there's leftovers, there's poor utilization at that level. In the developing world, there's sort of the opposite problem. Once the food reaches the consumer, it's typically used, eaten, or given away or shared. But a lot of the waste happens earlier in the supply chain. So weather implications on farming. So for example, you might have a beautiful crop followed by a few days of rain, and you just don't have the mechanization or the infrastructure to develop that crop. Problems with logistics and cold chain. So you might have beautiful food that can't get to market, maybe because of a lack of trucks, a lack of poor road conditions, weather, shipping, any number of concerns. And so the main challenge in much of the world is getting food to people. And the main challenge in other parts of the world is making sure that people only take what they need from the abundant markets. And so those two approaches and those two frameworks require very different policy solutions. And I think that's one of the challenges. While it's a global problem, the solutions have to be sensitive to the local challenges and local economies.
Okay.
Steve, do you have anything to add?
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan. I mean, definitely, and it's a great way to sum it up. Global problem, but definitely the need to tailor solutions to the local markets. And again, as we talk about that distinction between that high level distinction between where food waste occurs, again, mostly loss, en route to market in the less developed world, and at market to consumer in the developed world. So yeah, I would echo what Jonathan said.
Okay, CJ, are you back on the line?
Yes, actually,
okay.
I was on the line. So we have a couple of questions more.
We have 5 minutes.
Okay, let's get these questions out. Joy Doherty is asking, are farmers being encouraged to track, measure, and prevent food waste at their levels? In essence, in what ways are they being encouraged to do so? I think Steve can take care of this question.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's emerging, I guess I would call it. Typically, there are many factors going on here. Farmers typically all over the world tend to grow more, possibly as much as they can, typically to hedge against weather conditions, right? And to hedge against pests or any sort of condition that might reduce their crop, right? And so there's a tendency to grow more. And typically, I think there's a feeling that, well, if whatever's left can be plowed back into the soil for nutrients, right? And so we're finding there's some great work by Lisa Johnson out of NC State University that there's probably much more food left in fields after the initial harvest than we think there is, right? Some pretty high percentages. And so there's just work now being done to kind of, again, the importance of measurement, to measure that, and then to match, to create markets. What can we do with that? And if you know how much is there, you have a really good feeling for how much is there, and you have some certainty about what you can do downstream in terms of marketing that, then it gives the farmer the ability to make some decisions based on business factors about, do I go back there and have a second team go through and harvest? And is it cost effective for me to do that? So it's all about measurement. It's all about creating markets for that food. So yes, we're starting to see farmers being encouraged to do more. I think you'll see a lot more on that in the next 5-10 years.
Thank you. So we can take one more question. We have one here from Andy Coughlin. It says, how is government involved in these food projects? And is there any outreach in African countries? I think anyone can take care of this question. Let's give it to Jonathan.
Yeah, I think we actually talked about, I shared my answer regarding the US government. I think Africa, it obviously varies country by country. My experience there is limited, but it has been really that there's much more focus on making sure everyone has enough to eat, rather than worrying too much about the waste and the environmental impact of the waste. But I think that's changing as we see more food security and more sophisticated markets, and have the luxury of abundance and surplus. Food waste becomes more relevant. But in my experience, it's mostly been about, as I mentioned earlier, upstream in the process, How can we make sure that the food that's available for harvest is harvested? And how can we make sure that what's harvested can be transported safely to market and sold? And how can we make sure that what's in the marketplace is accessible financially to the widest populace possible?
And CJ, I'll just jump in there really quickly and to say that there in the United States, for example, there are a lot of interesting things happening at the state level that I think are starting to bubble up to the federal level. And a great example is something that we've had food waste bans from landfill that emerged in the New England states over the last handful of years. But a really exciting thing happening in California right now with what's called Senate Bill 1383, which actually has mandated a 50% reduction of food waste organics to landfill by 2020, a 75% reduction by 2025, and along with that 20% recovery of excess food in that stream to reroute it. So covering both prevention of food to landfills, food waste to landfills, and recovery of food for needy people too. And so I think that's underway. It'll be a really powerful thing. I think that will probably morph to other states. And I think at the scale of California, I think that will be a signal to other countries around the world too, that here's progressive legislation that can be focused on preventing and recovering excess food and kind of creating a circular process around food and food waste.
Thank you.
So, CJ, let's
yes.
go ahead and I'll turn it over to you to end this wonderful webinar. So thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you again, Monica, for wonderfully moderating this webinar. And we have a bunch of questions here. Some of them are issues regarding how to save, fruit or prevent fruit from spoiling. And I'm sure our presenters will have additional inputs that we are going to put up on our Suliver website. Again, I would use this opportunity first to thank our wonderful panelists, Dr. Finn, Dr. Jonathan, and Tove speaking and calling in from Sweden. We truly appreciate your input and your contributions to this wonderful topic. And it's an ongoing issue, it's an ongoing project. And I'm sure also that everyone calling in from wherever you are, every part of the world, we truly appreciate your input and your participation. Again, feel free to send in additional questions. If you have them, we are going to post them and share them with our panelists. And I thank you again for all your effort and the time you spent with us during this few minutes of discussion. On behalf of the Sustainability and Livelihood Research Organization, New York, I will give you a very great thank you and thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.